Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boxed Out, a conversation on affordable housing. I'm so excited about today's episode. We get to talk with Dr. John Moalli, who is the board chair of the San Juan Island Community Foundation. And he and I are going to be discussing the importance of philanthropy in our community and the ways that that is actually a critical support for our housing crisis today. So, John, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, Amanda.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Community Foundation? Give us an overview for maybe folks who don't know about what you do.
Sure, you bet. The Community Foundation's a nonprofit here on the islands with the mission of cultivating a sustainable future for San Juan Island and the San Juan Island community through collaboration and informed giving. And many islanders know the Community Foundation through our work at the fair, where we try to raise money for nonprofits, but that's really something that we do all year round.
So would you say that you serve every single islander?
Well, we try to serve every single islander, and we really believe we want every individual, every person on San Juan Island to be able to contribute to the well-being of our community. But we support nonprofits in all sectors, in education, in housing, in arts, and animal welfare. And so we really support islanders both directly and indirectly.
Yeah. And so the Community Foundation is involved in fundraising and also involved in ensuring that we are managing our community investments really well. Can you talk a little bit more about how you do that?
Sure, you bet. Well, we support the nonprofits on the island through regular grant cycles. And as I mentioned, the fair is one of those. We help donors support or fulfill their charitable goals. So, in other words, we have people that donate money to the Community Foundation, and then we put that into a fund for them that they can then just choose which nonprofits on the island they want to direct those funds for. And while that money is sitting with the Community Foundation, we actually invest it. We have a very active investment committee that manages all our investments. And so certainly it's market dependent, but we always hope that those investments are growing while they're sitting at the Community Foundation. And then the donors, as I said, can choose who they want to send those dollars off to on the island. We also maintain some endowed funds, and what that means is an endowed fund is where someone puts a sum of money into the Community Foundation, and then we support, for example, scholarships by just only not touching the initial amount of money that was deposited, but rather only working with the earnings that money has generated. So, last year, actually last academic cycle, but in 2024, the Community Foundation awarded over $250,000 in scholarships to San Juan Island students for college and sometimes vocational training, and the majority of that actually was done with endowed funds.
That's pretty amazing. And I think really speaks to the way that the Community Foundation is this anchor of a larger set of community needs that really all intersect with each other in so many ways, particularly in a small rural community like the one that we live in. So it's very cool to think about how impactful it can be when we're pulling all of our resources and having this centrally located agency that's able to see all of the different problems across the board and figure out how to impact them or, find creative solutions where there are shared needs. And I know that my organization, the Home Trust, we've been really growing and evolving and kind of moving into the next stage of our evolution as a nonprofit, which is so natural and normal. And I know that the Community Foundation is growing as well, and sort of evolving the way that you're working, evolving the way that you're building partnerships with other nonprofits and helping nonprofits build partnerships with each other. In particular, the Home Trust and the Community Foundation have been creating some really strong partnerships around housing. And I really love what we're doing. Honestly, I want to share that with the community, the ways that we have been working together to raise the necessary funds for our Argyle project. And so for folks in the community that don't know, the Home Trust is currently working on building 40 affordable rental units that will be permanently available to working class members of our community. And what many people don't realize that we're doing is that we're building moderate income housing. Half of these units are going to serve moderate income folks. And that's in line with what we know that this community needs. It's in line with what our local government really supports. And so we're doing it. The challenge is that it's really hard to get public funding to build moderate income housing. Those resources just don't exist. We all know about that gap where you make a little too much to get support, but not enough to actually make it and live on San Juan Island. So this project really is aiming to meet that need. And the Community Foundation has stepped in to help us. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the fund that we've created for this problem?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. And certainly, as you mentioned, that the Home Trust is evolving as an organization, and that's something that the Community Foundation has been doing more and more of, and that's working with these nonprofits as they evolve. So what are best practices for boards, and how do you set out a plan for growth? I mean, we facilitated something with a local art-based nonprofit where we're helping them develop their 5-year strategic plan, because they're at that stage where they really need that. But in terms of the Home Trust, I mean, the Community Foundation absolutely recognizes that housing is just an existential problem on the island, right? I mean, if you think about the people that really make the island tick, our teachers, our people that work in the hospital, people that work for the county, restaurant and grocery store workers. I mean, they all need a place to live. And it's really getting more and more difficult to find housing that's affordable. So we've absolutely recognized this. We've partnered with you to help you raise money. And we started that actually, just about a year ago, I guess it is, Amanda, because the Home Trust needed money for the Argyle project for some of the upfront costs, for dollars that you had to spend on things like
site work, project management,
exactly.
schematic design,
initial studies, lawyers' fees, things like that. And it's really not. Those are dollars that are they're necessary for a project like that, but sometimes donors might not be so interested in those, right? They might want to fund, just the bricks and mortar, the same way someone who's donating to, well, I was using an example of an art-based nonprofit. They might say, I want all my dollars to go to to programs and to pottery and to painting or whatever. You could get donors for housing that say, well, I want my dollars to go into building a house, but you need to do all these other things up front. So we partnered with you to raise those dollars, and we were very successful. And we have strong relationships with our donors, so we know which ones, for example, can see the big picture about those particular dollars that need to be spent, and that they're not going to, at least at that point in time, result in bricks and mortar, but are really need to be spent to make the project happen. And so yeah, we were able to raise a nice amount of money in a very short time to help support you in that project. And of course, we know that as the project moves forward, that we're going to have to continue to raise more and more dollars for the Argyle project.
Yeah, it was really incredible to see that show of generosity from our community. We were able to raise enough money to get us through pre-development in something like 4 to 6 weeks. It was very fast. I could be misquoting, but it was a very fast fundraising that we did with our local community to be able to get us to project readiness. And as you mentioned, of course, that's not the end. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the major components for the community to know about this project is that we're doing something that hasn't really been done. Especially in a rural community like ours, we're really taking a leap here in a way that San Juan County has done around so many other things and been so innovative with so many other things. And that leap requires philanthropists in our community to be alongside us. And the Community Foundation has really been an anchor in making sure that those relationships are strong. So with thinking about that, I kind of want to shift the conversation to philanthropy in general and what its place in the community is. I wonder if you can reflect a little bit on why philanthropy is important, particularly in a rural community like ours.
Yeah, I think, at the highest level in general, it's really important, Amanda, because it empowers communities by funding important initiatives. And it also, even beyond this community, we know that philanthropy can drive innovation and change by funding research, for example, and projects that might not receive traditional support. And another real important element of philanthropy is that it promotes equity by focusing on underserved populations. Now, locally, I think all of that is true, but through philanthropy, the Community Foundation helps support things that are just really important for our community, like housing, like education, like the arts, like environment, like animal welfare. And if you think about, for example, our hospital on the island, I mean, without local philanthropy, that would have never happened. And in fact, it was the Community Foundation raised essentially all of the money that was required, from a philanthropic perspective, to build the hospital. And look how many islanders have benefited from that. So. And the other thing about philanthropy locally, Amanda, right, is it gives us more control, right? So if our nonprofits, to support their missions, they're not having to rely entirely on grants from the state or grants from the federal government, or that can be subject to the whim of politicians. I mean, those can change with budget cuts or depending on who's in office. And I'm not saying for a moment that those aspects of funding aren't important, because they absolutely are. But if you want to create a stable funding stream, for example, for nonprofits, then philanthropy has to be an important element of that. And as I mentioned earlier, when I was talking about philanthropy in general, there are some things that you just can't get grants for, or you can't get enough grant dollars. You can't get sufficient grant dollars to support what you're trying to accomplish. And so then local philanthropy becomes very, very important.
Yeah, and just like we talked about with the Argyle project, I think if not for the home fund and the REIT existing to serve those moderate income folks, and the local philanthropy landscape that we have here in this community that's willing to provide flexible dollars, I don't see a way that we could build Argyle, especially not for the population of people that we're trying to build for. Like you said, nurses, people who work in the county, people who work in the sheriff's department, just all of these folks that make sure that things run on the island the way that they are supposed to. So it's really, I agree with you. It's really critical to be able to develop that local control, particularly as you mentioned, when we know that the whims of public funding can shift and change. We've seen some really strong examples of that recently. For example, the Argyle project relies on something called CHIP funding, which is something that helps us offset the connection fees that we need to pay for sewer and water.
Right.
The town can't afford to lose that revenue. They're already running on a super tight budget, so they can't just give us connection fees. That's not a realistic, viable option for them. We've always relied on these federal dollars that come in, support those connection fees, and we're able to have those dollars come into our community and support the affordable housing that is coming in as well. We've just learned that CHIP funding is soon to be cut. I don't know what that means for Argyle, but we're counting on $500,000 for that project. So that could be an impact where we might not be able to find other revenue, and philanthropy can step in and make sure that we can still build that housing. We've got another recent example. The Home Trust has historically relied on USDA 502 direct loans. These are mortgage loans that allow people in rural areas who would not otherwise be able to buy a home to buy a home. That's how we've sold most of our houses. These loans work with people who have lower credit ratings. They work at a lower interest rate. They allow for a higher debt to income ratio, effectively creating an opportunity where there wouldn't otherwise be one.
But there's a crazy bureaucratic process associated with that.
Right. So there's always been this huge bureaucratic process. Since the Home Trust started, we've been telling people it'll take a year or more to close on your loan. That's just the reality of using this program. Well, in the last year or so, we've seen it get cut desperately more and more. And now wait times are looking like 3 years or more to close one of these loans, which is just absolutely not viable. So as the Home Trust has navigated this problem, we're doing lots of things. We're finding new loan products. Our director of housing, Lily Goldberg, has been working really hard and actually has created a mortgage product with a local bank that's now going national to support community land trusts. So we're being really innovative and responsive, but we can't fix everything. We can't correct the larger landscape of what interest rates look like. We can't necessarily control closing costs and other things that the USDA was able to help us support home buyers with. And so once again, the Community Foundation stepped in. Lily and I approached the Community Foundation and we've started to explore how could we provide down payment assistance to local community members who are first-time home buyers or who are low-income members buying a house. And of course, as you know, we're in the very early stages of this, but it was another way that the Home Trust was able to identify this problem and this space that public funding was failing and not supporting the need in our local community. And the Community Foundation was able to step in with philanthropy and look at finding and problem solving in a way where there are not public resources available.
Right. Yeah, you just hate for someone to get that far where they've been approved for whatever the optimal loan product is that you've identified for them, yet they still have some costs associated with closing on the property, right? And to come that far and just not have those additional dollars to be able to cross the finish line would be tragic, right? And so yeah, I love that we're in these early stages of trying to define what a down payment assistance program would look like. And I feel confident that that's something that we'll be able to make happen, just figuring out the administrative logistics of that. But I also feel confident that there are just really committed philanthropic donors that would support a program like that, because they understand the necessity, they understand the importance of affordable housing on the island. And really, if we are going to talk about a sustainable future for the island, it has to involve affordable housing.
Yeah, and I think that's, that's what the Community Foundation is doing so well, is fostering relationships that provide people an opportunity to step in and invest in community needs that match their um, passions, match the things that are important to them, that make sense to them, and really allowing for philanthropy to step up and offer our community resources that we would not otherwise have. And
Yeah,
for me,
and they,
I go ahead, John.
oh yeah, sorry. And I was going to say, and that that comes about in many ways, right? So through the community foundation, again, someone can, well, let's say you're a nonprofit, right? And you have a program that you need support for. So it could be could be, for example, the Family Resource Center YAS program, the Young Adult Association of San Juan. And they may say, well, we need some dollars for this. And they can apply to the Community Foundation for a grant. And then the Community Foundation, it's not like the Community Foundation has this infinite pool of dollars, right? We have something that we call our Healthy Communities Fund. And so, we try to replenish that every year. And, that those are discretionary dollars that we can then, apply towards a grant from the Family Resource Center or any other nonprofit. But then we also have what are called donor advised funds. So individuals put money into the Community Foundation. And then when a grant like this comes up, we'll send them a note and say, hey, here's a project that you might be interested in. And that's just based on our relationship with that individual. Of course, we know what their donating history has been. And you might want to think about using some dollars from your donor advised fund to help support this particular grant. And so that's how we typically fund any given grant. Then we also have these separate sort of programs that are really new to us over the last 18 months or so. And that would be like this project we had with the Home Trust, where you say, we don't really want to apply for a grant right now. We don't have that much time, but we need a large amount of capital, and we'd like to engage you to help us raise that. And we have, so we just did that one successfully with the Home Trust. We're working on one like that right now with the Spring Street International School with some specific dollars that they're trying to raise. We're working on a project like that with the Island Conservation District related to a remote education facility that they're trying to set up. And so those have also been really, really actually fun and exciting for us. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to be able to work with all of these different nonprofits and understand what their needs are and who they serve. And as part of a normal grant process, Amanda, we ask them once their grant, the program for which the grant was awarded is finished, we say, can you give us some information on how that went? And so it's really just wonderful to get that feedback and see the photos of the islanders that it impacted. And that could be anything from, children in an arts program to, people that are using animals for mental health therapy and things like that. I mean, it's just a really wide variety. And when I became chair of the board at the Community Foundation, one huge benefit, personal benefit that I actually never anticipated was I have to sign most of the checks that go out from the Community Foundation. And it is really just, it is just a pleasure to be able to do that and know that we're helping on this local level or last summer when I had to sign the scholarship checks for all the students, and just to know that we're taking these local kids from the island and giving them these opportunities to go off the island and go to college or do vocational training, and it's just, yeah, it's really just wonderful to be able to be a part of that.
It's amazing. And I think a lot of people have a perception that philanthropy is maybe inaccessible to them, or maybe something that's not for them, or that they're not a part of. But I think that the Community Foundation has done such a good job of creating opportunities for people at every level of wealth to invest in their community. For example, I've joined the Women's Donor Advised Fund that the Community Foundation has, which is focused on local initiatives that support women and girls. And because I'm donating even the small amount I'm able to donate to that each year, I get to have a voice in how that fund gets used, and I get to influence how women in my community are supported.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Community
The
Foundation is doing
Women's
that.
Fund is
Awesome.
just, yeah, the Women's Fund is just a great example of how, you can pull donations of all sizes, and then have this synergistic effect where then you can take those pooled dollars and really make an impact to an organization. And the same is true for the fair. I mean, we typically raise, somewhere between 100 and $200,000 at the fair, and a lot of those dollars, Amanda, are donations that come in 5, 10, $20, right? That people, but the Community Foundation really thinks we could do a better job at that. We could really do a better job at, as I was trying to say earlier, about letting every islander know that they can be empowered to make a philanthropic donation and have impact on our local nonprofits. So we're exploring right now, um, how can we further develop youth philanthropy, right? And we're looking at different examples that other organizations have gone through, in high schools and things like that, where you would also create pooled funds with the students, and then let them choose where they want to have their impact in terms of organizations, that need help on the island. So we think we can get better at that. We'd like to take it beyond the fair, and develop programs and initiatives where people can feel comfortable in donating no matter what the amount is, right?
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and be confident that whatever that was, that donation that they made, that it will have a impact locally right here on San Juan Island.
Yeah, because pulling our resources is so powerful that way, you know. So I love hearing that. I love hearing that you're working on getting more folks in the door. And I think that's what I was getting at. I think there's just this perception, it's kind of behind this wall. Philanthropy is behind this wall, and we don't always feel like we can participate in it. But especially in a community like this one that is so tight knit, so small, so close, there is no reason that we can't all be involved in pulling those resources and making them as impactful as possible. And that's
Yes.
exactly why the Community Foundation is, in my mind, one of our most important nonprofits. I mean, it's sort of the anchor of all of us in a certain way, if you think about it.
I think that's true, and and thank you for those kind words. And it's really wonderful also to look at how our community, recognizes when there is a strong need. So, for example, during COVID, when we were all, isolated, and there were businesses on the island that were just really suffering. And, the Community Foundation created an emergency COVID relief fund, and islanders were just hugely generous and donated, large amounts of money to help people that they knew would really be in need.
Yeah.
And the community foundations given those dollars to, for example, to the Family Resource Center, who is also a very strong partner of the community foundation. The work that Jennifer and her team are doing at the Family Resource Center is just beyond wonderful. I just there's just so many things, and we love partnering with them and supporting them in their initiatives as well.
Yeah, and it allowed the partnerships. I know this has been our experience at the Home Trust. It's not that we're not fundraisers. We are, and we're passionate about our work, and we love to tell stories about our work, but we're a small organization, and we're working really hard to meet the needs of people directly, just like the Family Resource Center is. So fundraising is it's extra bandwidth for us, and the Community Foundation providing that extra bandwidth and helping to support that, especially for these massive community challenges like housing, which you put it so well earlier, it's truly an existential challenge in our community, and it's not going anywhere, and it's going
Yeah.
to need such large sums of money and investment to address it, specifically from philanthropy, and it'll require partnerships. The Home Trust and the FRC already work together, but one of the other ways that the Community Foundation is such a hub is being intimately familiar with the work that the FRC does and that we do, and being able to be at the table with both of us and say, hey, what if we work together in this way or that way? And I think as we move down the road into a sort of uncertain future, that's going to be even more important for us to have that anchor that knows the nonprofits well, through the work that the Community Foundation is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of our goals that we have moving forward, is to strengthen our relationships within the community, right? And it's not just with nonprofits; it's also with community leaders, and so that can be at the town or the county level, and just because I think from the last election, it was super clear that all of the candidates for county council had affordable housing on their minds, and I think they have some wonderful ideas as to things that can be done by them to promote affordable housing. But I think it's also important for the nonprofit organizations and the county leadership to have strong relationships and understand what each other can bring to the table, and to try to solve this problem that we've all seen, we've recognized, and sadly we've seen it become more and more and more critical as housing prices go up and interest rates go up, and for a while there inflation was increasing, and it's just it's really important to have those relationships so we can best sort our community.
Yeah, it's becoming even more and more impossible to actually accomplish the goal of building affordable housing, for example, because the numbers just keep growing. You and I talked about this recently when we initially pitched the Argyle project to the Community Foundation in 2022. Our numbers were looking like maybe 19.5 million, just shy of 20 million. And costs continue to grow up. We've had an inflation crisis since then. So, our most recent cost estimates with some room for escalation are coming in at 22 million. That's a pretty big growth spurt for just a couple of years. And so thinking about addressing this crisis for the long haul, thinking about the 100-year plan for our island, I think that early being now, which is already a little too late, but better today than 10 years from now. The more we can invest in this moment, in this time, particularly in models like the Home Trust that are creating permanently affordable assets that are never going to go out into the market, that are never going to be lost investments, we're able to curb that. But it feels like sometimes the need is so great. We're talking about one 40-unit project.
Yes.
I recently, well, a little while ago now, I learned sort of working my way through the numbers that are in the local housing needs assessments, and I learned that we're going to need 400 houses over the next 20 years. And that's a really scary number to think about, not just because that's a lot of houses to get built, but if you know anything about affordable housing development, it doesn't move very fast, So um, thinking about getting Argyle online is a 4 to 6 year project for 40 units, So when we think about 400 units that are going to be needed over the next 20 years, 20 years feels like a really long time to build out 400 units, but I've been doing this a long time, and I can tell you it is not a very long time at all.
No, all I can
So.
say, Amanda, is it's a good thing you're young.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can see this, so you can see this process through. But I think you bring up a really interesting point there, right? Which is that so the island needs 400 houses, and what you're talking about with the Argyle project is creating 40 rental units, right? And so how do you scale, to fit that need? And I'm not saying that the home trust is the only solution, right? But clearly, as one of the most important contributors to solving the affordable housing crisis on the island, the home trust is an important player. And so what does that mean? That means you need to scale, right? And so how do you scale? That means, because you were talking about the bandwidth, right? And do we have the bandwidth to raise money here? Well, right now we don't. So we'll have the community foundation help us. But as you get more and more housing units that you create, and those are all going to have demands on your time. So the home trust needs to grow. Why am I talking about that in terms of philanthropy? Well, I think it's important for people to understand that for nonprofits to deliver, they need to scale, they need to grow. And so what does that mean? That means that dollars that come into the nonprofit have to be used for operational expenses. And sometimes people just don't understand that, sadly. As I was saying earlier, you might have a donor for the home trust who says, yeah, I would love to give the home trust money, Amanda, but I want all of my dollars to go to a house. And in reality, to do the most forward thinking and think about scaling your organization and a lot of the other nonprofits, more dollars, at least initially, are going to have to go into operations. And so if there's one thing that I really wish I could just magically get donors sometimes to understand, it's that it's really important that not all your dollars go, towards programs. Some of them really need to go to operations, because there's no way that the organizations can grow and then scale so that we can solve these problems if we don't spend money on hiring people within those organizations, right? And if you hire people and you pay them, living wages on this island, which are inordinately high, and people really feel that, then that is going to take dollars that are being spent on operations. And what you hope, right, is that as the organization builds capacity with these new people that they hire, then that'll create revenue either from philanthropy, or it could be that the home trust needs to hire an urban housing grant specialist, whatever that would be called, right? But someone whose sole job it is not just Amanda, the executive director, right? But someone whose entire focus can be on bringing in revenue from a particular source. And there's no way that the nonprofits can do that without spending operational dollars. So
Yeah,
I'm
you're so right.
yeah, I'm well aware of how this all started, and how some people, want to know, of each dollar they spend, how many cents are going to operations and how many are going to programs. But I think there are times in the life of a nonprofit where that ratio, needs to be distorted. And
Mhm.
it's the only way that the nonprofit can grow
And
and
deliver. Yeah. Deliver what's
and
needed.
deliver.
Yeah, I
Deliver,
think,
exactly.
using the home trust as an example, we started in 2003. We had a very dedicated team that built our first 49 houses that we have over that 20 plus year period. And now we're going to build 40 more. So we're going to double the portfolio. So there's all these houses now that we have to take care of. We have to support all of the people. Our wait list grows with that. We're designing new programming, right? And what I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize is I wouldn't say it's easy, but there are a lot more resources for me to go out and get dollars to pay for lumber, to pay for windows, to pay for an engineer to do my site work for me, all that kind of stuff. There are channels that have been created for those. And the way that the affordable housing world works, it kind of relies on me as an affordable housing developer continuing to develop. And I'm able to siphon off a little bit of the revenue from developing housing to support my ongoing operations of my organization, which does work to some degree. It works really, really effectively, but there's a couple challenges with that. One, if you're in a very small rural community where it is very difficult and takes a long time to develop housing, being able to
Right.
develop enough housing to generate that revenue is really difficult to make happen. And the second part is exactly like you said, organizations go through these periods of growth, like we are in right now, where we are going from this very small nonprofit that built 49 houses over 20 years to a nonprofit that is trying to deliver 400 houses in 20 years. It's a very, very different scale of what we're trying to do. And that requires really qualified staff that can manage those programs and projects. And as you said, those staff need to be able to afford housing on the island and need to be able to afford the higher costs that are here. So we're certainly seeing that. And I know that, many philanthropists in our community really care about housing and want to impact it. And so I agree with you. The story that I want to tell is this idea that your impact can go so much further by actually supporting getting capable people and a capable program going that can create and deliver 400 houses in 20 years than putting your money into one house. Not that that's a bad use of your dollars, but I'm more likely able to get money from the state for those windows and lumber than I am to grow my organization. So having those local partnerships that can see that vision of, hey, our local government has identified that we need 400 houses in 20 years. How do we get there? We have this really well-established organization, or two or three in some
Right.
communities. And we're supporting those organizations to grow to be able to meet that supply side that we need. So it is really critical. And I recently went to a conference where Jolie Bruner of Opal spoke, and she gave a statistic that has just been just rattling around in my head. And it was not a statistic. She presented a graph that showed Opal's development over time and Opal's level of staffing over time. And for those who are watching and don't know, Opal Community Land Trust is a powerhouse nationally. It is one of the most innovative, strongest community land trusts, definitely within our region, but I think even the country. And I've seen this chart and I've talked to Jolie Bruner about it. And it's very telling when you look at it that when they had adequate staffing, they were able to increase their development incredibly, which makes sense. You have more people to support you, you can do more.
Of course.
But seeing it laid out like that was so impactful, and I've just never stopped thinking about it. And then I interviewed them on Boxed Out. They were my most recent episode, and I asked them. I said, "What do you think think's been the difference for Opal? How have you been able to do all of this?" And what they said was philanthropy, the incredible levels of philanthropy that existed on Orcas Island that allowed them to build up that portfolio. And now, a significant portion of the students in the Orca school are living in Opal homes. Like, there's this level of stability for the community that's there, the local community that's there, that cannot be taken away. And, they got it in early. They built all those houses in the 90s. So they've got 100 and some houses in their portfolio that they're not spending $500,000+ a unit on, because building costs were so much lower back then.
Right.
So
and it's 8%, right? And
yeah.
8% of all.
I couldn't remember the number, but it's like close to 10.
Yeah.
8% is a significant amount of community members that are in their housing and stable. So it's, we're on the precipice of another one of those opportunities. In 20 years, we're going to be joking about, remember when we could build a house for $500,000? So we have an opportunity on San Juan Island to do the same thing, and really scale, as you said, scale out. And not just, like you said, not just with the Home Trust. We are currently the only permanently affordable housing developer on the island, but we may not always be. There may be other groups. We saw in Lopez Community Land Trust was established in '89, I think. And Housing Lopez just popped up in the last couple of years, and they have slightly different missions. They're working together to meet different needs. And I don't think that would be a bad thing on San Juan at all, So it might not always be just the Home Trust that's addressing housing. But for now, that is who's addressing housing, So I think it's just, I want people to know that there is this huge opportunity to invest and scale and set ourselves up for success, so that when we look back in 20 or 30 years, we're like, oh yeah, we did great in the 2020s. That was a good time for us.
Yeah. And it's also interesting when you look at so many of the issues on the island, and you sort of parse them through. It's crazy how many of them actually come back to housing again.
Yep.
Right? And affordable housing, right? And there's things that are visible, like when a restaurant closes because they can't get sufficient staff. But when you think about some of the change that you want to implement, and then that you need people to do that, and if you're going to bring people to the island, they need a place to live. And what you're doing is amazing, because the moderate level income is the hardest group to actually get funding for, right? To build houses. Yet that's the group that we need to serve right now. And so it's really, it's complicated things in that way. And you guys, you're obviously understanding the needs on the island, and trying to balance that sufficiently, and then doing what you need to do to to raise the money that's going to be necessary to supply housing for people at the moderate level for the AMI. And I think that obviously because of the focus in that area, philanthropy is going to be a really, really important part of that equation.
It definitely will be. Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Us trying to support this community of people that do not have other resources, but that is so desperately needed. And we keep saying internally at the Home Trust, it doesn't matter if we want to do this or not. Our community needs this, and we need to step up and support our community, because that's what we exist to do. So we will figure it out, but we won't figure it out if we don't have philanthropy in the room. That is the make or break of this. And so I think, that's bringing me to, our fundraising goals for that project and for the Community Foundation in general. I can kind of kick us off, but I want to hear about what you guys are trying to raise in the next couple of years for maybe certain specific projects you have. I know one of those, as we've talked about, is Argyle, where we're going to need $4 to $5 million for that project over the next few years. And the community foundation has agreed to partner. But I know that we're not the only project that you're thinking about. So I'd love to hear what the community foundation's got on the radar.
Yeah, there are some other, just from the housing perspective. I mean, the hospital district actually is in an effort right now to try to create some affordable housing and possibly on the campus of Peace Island. And you don't think about that, right? You might say, oh well, gosh, everyone who works there must be well compensated, but it's still, even if you are well compensated, the median home price on the island is close to $1 million, and you just might not be able to buy a house like that. So, the hospital district, so they are on our radar. They have actually, talked to us about helping them raise money for affordable housing. And we're not doing that right now, but it's something that's definitely on our radar. We certainly have had discussions with the library. I think, as people know, they have they went out for a bond measure. It didn't go well for them, and they've adjusted now on what their methods and means are going to be in terms of raising money for the library. So again, it's not something we're formally engaged in right now, but we absolutely have sat down with them and talked about what fundraising for the new library project would look like. We also, again, a lot of people don't know this, but we are contractually, actually, we're the primary fundraiser for the hospital. And so they're looking at some big projects for, new equipment that they need. And so, we'll help raise money for those. And again, that's something that will benefit all islanders, or at least islanders who are going in for medical care at Peace Island. So those are some of the projects that are on our radar screen. But we're looking at, over the next probably 5 to 7 years, having to raise in excess of $10 million.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yes, just on those particular projects. And that's in addition to, the money that we raise to grant to nonprofits that have nothing to do with affordable housing, right? So, philanthropy, definitely. It's obviously it's hugely important. And as I said, to that end, we are trying to increase awareness in the community about who the Community Foundation is and what they do. We're actually trying to make the grant process easier for nonprofits by simplifying it. So it's not as difficult to apply for grants. We're actually also trying to increase the number of people who do their philanthropy through the Community Foundation. And there are a lot of benefits for people doing that. And so, and we are an island organization, but for our donors who keep their charitable funds at the Community Foundation, they can donate to a nonprofit anywhere, right? So if they want to donate to their university, for example, or they want to donate to a national organization, we do that all of the time. But if you really want to have an effect locally, we're trying to encourage people to keep their philanthropy dollars at the Community Foundation and distribute them from there, because that helps us have more dollars than to give out to the community. And it's there are a lot of benefits, not only to islanders, but to the individual donor. There are benefits, because as soon as they put money into the Community Foundation, we give them a receipt that they can use for tax deductions. So they get that benefit immediately, and then they can distribute the money as they see fit. So
And even
we're
those
yeah we're
pass-through dollars, like, I'm going to donate to my alma mater through the community foundation. The community foundation in the island still gets the benefit of that money being in the pool, and maybe the interest earned off of that money while it was in the pool. So, um, yeah, the community foundation can be this real hub of, like you said, if you want to have an impact locally, partnering with the community foundation is the way to do that.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be an exorbitant amount of money, to open a donor advised fund at the community foundation. And so we're trying to get that word out. We'd like people to, more people to keep their charitable, their philanthropic dollars at the community foundation. And of course, that means that, so just like you, Amanda, we're trying to grow the amount of money that we give away. In order to do that, we need to scale. So we, as you know, in the spring, we hired a new executive director, Amy Sachs-Eiler, who is just doing an amazing job and getting out there in the community and really getting our staff to gel. We just hired a new assistant executive director, Missy Martin, who will be starting, around the first of the year. We're truly excited to have her on board. And then, of course, Carrie Pinko and Katie Stringer are doing their magic at the Community Foundation and keeping things humming. But we're going to need to hire more people as well. And so, that increases our operational costs. And we've done things like applied for grants from the Murdoch Trust, which, I'm sure you're familiar with. And what they'll do is they will fund someone at your organization, fully for 1 year. And then, they reduce it in the second year and reduce it in the third year. And then you're on your own. And so, they recognize that in order to scale and build capacity that, you might need some of these seed dollars. And so, we do look for funding from off the island as well for some of our programs, but mostly we rely on the generosity of islanders, to support the programs that we're trying to support.
And you really work with people to do that. I know we have some shared donors between the Home Trust and the Community Foundation, folks who care very deeply about our mission and also care about many other things in the community. So they're giving in many ways. And I know from my own experience with some of our donors that have had a really positive opportunity to sit down at the Community Foundation and find what is the best fit for their dollars and their investment. And not only what is the best fit, but what are the mechanics of that? How do you want your dollars allocated out over time, for example, for what specific goals, so it's not just sort of throwing your money into the void. It is really building a relationship where you are known, you are a partner, you are an investor, and you are able to have the impact that you want to have. And the Community Foundation's a partner in creating that opportunity.
Right. And, you mentioned how you might want your dollars to be spent in the future. And, we have donors that have established what we call legacy funds at the Community Foundation. So what that means is, as part of their will, they're donating money to the Community Foundation, and then they ask us to be stewards of that money and, where they want it to be spent, where those dollars will go in terms of what types of nonprofits, what types of programs are important to them. And, and as I mentioned, the scholarship money that we give away every year, there was a specific donor who left a large sum of dollars and said, I want this all to go to scholarships for local high school students who are going to go to college and really need the dollars. And we actually, for lots of those scholarships, there's an opportunity to renew them on an annual basis. So, the students get the money for the 4 years that they're in college. It's really
Which
great.
can be so impactful. Yeah, it can. Yeah. I guess Yeah, just really know. I want people to know that they can really tailor how they are having an impact. Um, well, John, I think that we are getting close to our time, but I
Quite
really,
fast.
yeah, it did. And it was a really good conversation. I'm really grateful to you for helping me illustrate the ways that all of these challenges in our community intersect, and so do all of the solutions. And the Community Foundation is right in the center of those solutions. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. And is there anything else that you want to let folks know before we sign off?
Well, let me just say I'm it's my pleasure to actually be here, and it's the pleasure of the Community Foundation to partner with the Home Trust on what is such an important issue for the islands. And what we really hope is that more islanders are going to get to know us and understand that they can contribute at any level and still have an impact on San Juan Island. And it's really important to us that every individual knows that they can contribute to the collective well-being of San Juan Island. And that can be in housing, it can be in education, it can be in the arts, it can be in the environment, healthcare, animal welfare, all that stuff. Those are all causes that we support. But I personally really look forward to continuing to work with you, Amanda, and I know the Community Foundation does, and our board is thrilled to continue working with your board, and yeah, let's set some great examples for people on things that can be done with philanthropy and affordable housing.
Yes, definitely. The Home Trust feels the same way. We are so excited about our partnership with the Community Foundation, and we know we can have a really immense impact on the housing crisis. To my audience, thank you so much for tuning in with us for another episode of Boxed Out. As most of you know, we've moved to a new on-demand model because we're all kind of floating around in the Salish Sea. So we won't have an exact schedule for a next episode, but you can expect another to come out on our YouTube within about 4 weeks. For now, I'm really excited to be a part of this community. I'm really excited to keep working on affordable housing, and I appreciate y'all coming along for the ride. Thank you.